Thank you very much for having me here today. It's great to be here. I'll be presenting our research titled Exploring the Evolution of Augmented and Virtual Reality Education Space in 2020 through Systematic Literature Review. The research was conducted by myself, Naheem, and Dr. Sanchari at the University of Denver. Special thanks to Dr. Daniel Pittman and Lexi Reddington for providing their feedback on the paper. While my research centers around augmented reality, virtual reality, and emerging technologies as well as cybersecurity, Sanchari Das's research interest lies in security, privacy, Internet of Things, augmented reality, virtual reality, education, and human-computer interaction. To begin with, we've seen the implementation of AR, VR across different domains, from e-commerce industry where users can easily try items before buying them, to automotive industry, to fashion, gaming, hospitality, events, and then education. In the educational sector, it has transformed the mode of content delivery. It creates real-time interactive graphics with 3D models that are combined with display technology to give users a sense of immersion. This has led to better student engagement, understanding of advanced concepts, enhanced practicality of teaching, as well as enhanced student creativity. However, challenges such as the difficulty of usage and technical problems still exist. Also, the fact that it degrades interpersonal connection, it is highly addictive, and even it is expensive to procure still remains a major problem. In 2019, the pandemic brought about a rapid shift to online education. According to the World Education Forum, over 1.2 billion students were out of school, and this led to a quick adoption of educational technology to meet student educational needs. The purpose of our research was to better understand the advancement in AR/VR-enabled education, especially in the period when students are learning from home. The objectives of our research, we wanted to identify which technologies were frequently used and in what ways they are introduced to students and educators in a formal education system. We also wanted to identify the advantages and limitations experienced in the implementation of AR/VR in formal education from the user perspective. We also wanted to evaluate the impact of AR/VR on students' learning. For our systematic literature review, we underwent 4 processes. Firstly, we had database set for our focused papers, then screening the abstract as well as the full text, then the user studies and thematic analysis. And finally, we had our meta-analysis, which was focused on knowledge retention. For our database search, we searched papers that were published in the year 2020 from the Google Scholar database. We performed keyword-based search using keywords like AR education, VR education, augmented reality education, simulation-based in our education, and so on and so forth. The search yielded about 80,900 published papers. And we now perform title screening and removal of duplicated papers. And we were left with about 242 papers. Then we created an automated script to search for relevant keywords in the abstract and then the entire paper. We also removed papers that were literature reviews, and we were left with 88 papers. We manually screened the paper, and the paper were collated in a code book. We categorized the papers into relevant, not relevant, and borderline papers, depending on the relevance to our search focused on user studies. We further removed paper with the not relevant rating from our study and focused on the remaining 61 papers for the thematic analysis. Of these papers, 17 papers were analyzed qualitatively, 34 quantitatively, and 10 were mixed method analyzed. Our meta-analysis measured the learning gains of participants when using AR/VR technology. We did this by analyzing the quantitative studies which focused on knowledge retention. Our analysis included 14 selected randomized control experiments. These studies measured the quantitative effects of the use of the technology and its impact on the students' knowledge retention. The learning gains were measured based on QSD effect size, which measures the magnitude of the experimental effect. The larger the effect size, the stronger the relationship between the two variables, which were the use of AR/VR as well as learning effectiveness. For our thematic analysis, the 61 papers that were qualitative analyzed, we focused on them and we grouped them into 3 sections. We had evaluative, exploratory, and definitive papers. Evaluative papers are the papers that carried out an academic post-test to evaluate the knowledge retention of the participants through academic assessments, while exploratory papers carried out surveys through the use of interviews, observations, and questionnaires. Finally, definitive papers combine the strategy in both evaluative and exploratory categories. That is, the papers performed academic post-tests as well as surveyed to get at the insight of the effectiveness of the technology. We highly recommend papers that were definitive in approach. We believe that research that focused on evaluating the knowledge retention as well as the surveyed view of participants would be effective in measuring the success of AR and VR in the educational space. Our findings suggested that paper focused on just survey, that is the papers that were exploratory in context, were most occurring in the space. Let's dive into the detailed analysis of the study. We were interested in knowing the locations where AR/VR research were being conducted. We believe it should provide insight on the need for more research in locations where AR/VR hasn't been entirely focused on. Unsurprisingly, most research in AR and VR in the year 2020 came from the United States. Taiwan and Taiwan also dominated the space. We also noticed some developing countries like Nigeria are also looking towards the direction, with at least 1 paper released in the year. It is important to note that Taiwan and Indonesia are actively focused on research that are backed with both assessments and surveys. However, surveyed research still dominates the United States. It should be interesting to see more research on AR/VR coming from the European nations. Also, we wanted to know the educational models that were applying AR/VR. These would open doors for further research in subject areas that are yet to implement AR/VR or areas with limited research. General science has dominated the implementation of AR/VR. Subject areas like geoscience, computer science, geometry, and biology are the top fields. The use of AR and VR in the medical field is gaining momentum as well. Mostly it is used in the conduction of trainings of medical students for surgical practices. All language learning were focused on English language, which signifies the need to implement AR/VR in the study of other languages. While more research that are backed with both learning assessments and surveys are popping up in medicine and language learning, it is quite ironic that most research in science were focused on surveys only. It would be interesting to see more applications of AR/VR in arts and commercial subject areas. Also, we wanted to gather insights regarding the educational levels adopting AR/VR from childhood education to graduate and postgraduate education. These insights would allow researchers to further refine their focused educational level for AR/VR research. It is interesting to see that AR and VR are being implemented across different educational levels. Undergraduate study unsurprisingly takes the lead. And there's a need to focus on undergraduate research more on assessing the knowledge gained by students through pre-test and post-test academic assessment. In fact, no college paper was found to analyze both academic assessment, and student opinion gathered through surveys or observations, that is definitive papers. It is also important to analyze technologies used in implementing AR/VR. Research are growing in this area, so we can better understand the technologies that best suit students and enhances their learning gains. Based on our research, we realized 360-degree video and 3D imagery were the most technology implemented to produce AR/VR content in the educational space. It is nice to see that researchers have started combining several technologies to identify the effects on students' learning. For instance, we had few papers that combine 3D imagery and 360-degree video. Also, we had papers that combine 360-degree video, 3D imagery, and 3D animation. There's need for more research in this area to compare the time that is needed to create the content, the cost implication, as well as the effect on students' learning. As we are looking into the best technologies to implement AR/VR, it is highly important we pay close attention to the device that is used in propagating the technology, especially if we are focused on increasing its level of acceptance in the society. According to Statista, the global smartphone penetration rate is estimated to have reached over 78% by 2020. So it is interesting to see that AR/VR implementation is increasing on mobile devices. This would increase its acceptability and its usage. It would also make it highly affordable. However, it is important to compare the effect of these different devices on students' learning so we can better identify the approach that will provide better results in the students' academics. Our systematic review indicated the importance of AR/VR, but also stressed the fact that the technology is still actively developing, especially in the educational sector. This is reinforcing the need for more research in the area that is focused especially on user studies. AR/VR user-focused research in the educational sector has focused more on collecting data through the use of surveys, observations, and interviews to analyze properties such as the learning motivation, the cognitive load, satisfaction, perception, learning experience, among others. While we believe that it is important to track these properties, we inform the essentiality of assessing student academic performance before and after the adoption of AR/VR in order to measure the learning effectiveness. We've also seen the incremental penetration of mobile devices across the globe, especially in the developing countries. The development of more mobile-specific AR/VR educational content in the education space will definitely drive its acceptability and, of course, its affordability. Undoubtedly, developing AR/VR content takes considerable time and seems arduous for facilitators, as well as teachers in the educational space. We would want to get to a point where these facilitators and teachers can easily create this content and manage the technology will lead to or no reliance on technicians. This could only happen if AR/VR tools are human-centeredly designed and focus on the ease of use. Lastly, we've seen the implementation of AR/VR across different educational sectors from elementary school, high school, colleges, and universities. According to World Bank, over 1 billion people are disabled globally. In fact, out of the 2.6 billion children and adolescents in the world, 11.2% are disabled. These disabilities could be traumatic brain injury, visual or auditory impairment, and so on. So it is highly important for researchers to drive more research towards the effectiveness of AR/VR amongst these special groups, and also the development of AR/VR tools that are targeted at each specific group should be looked into as well. To understand the relationship between the experimental mean and control mean of the randomized control trials, we perform statistical analysis plot a scatter plot, and the data appears to be linearly distributed at 95% confidence interval, depicting that the correlation was statistically significant. We also calculated the coincidence effect size of the randomized control trials using the mean and standard deviation from the experimental and control groups um, to identify the impact of AR/VR on learning effectiveness. The mean effect size calculated from the studies was D is equal to 0.25. This value falls in the small effect size category, and this indicates that AR/VR has a positive impact on learning effectiveness. However, the impact is small. And this result could be, it could be as a result of the few number of randomized control trials that we explored in the analysis, which were 14. Some of the limitations of our work was that we focused exclusively on papers that were published in 2020. This is because we wanted to target research that were published during the pandemic. It's also possible that we might have missed some papers which are not reflected in Google Scholar. And in the future, what we plan on doing is going through individual digital libraries to conduct another extensive search, looking into libraries such as ACM, SIGGRAPH, IEEE, and others. And we're also interested in designing, implementing, and studying AR/VR technologies that are compatible with educational models. Finally, I'd like to leave us with a quote by Tim Cook, which says, and I quote, that I don't think that a significant portion of the population of developed countries and eventually all countries will have AR experiences every day, almost like eating 3 meals a day. It will become that much a part of you. So what this tells us is that AR/VR will eventually be adopted in every nook and cranny in the globe, but the bulk of the work would be on researchers being able to ensure that it is ethically used, it is designed to be highly purposeful and beneficial, and it is widely accepted. It is possible that I missed some information from our research. So for the detailed analysis, you could access our paper via the link, and you could also engage me as well as Sanchari does on Twitter or send us an email. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Where am I? There you go. So I'm going to start with some questions from the floor, and I have one question from myself. So I'm going to put this. So do you think it would be possible to create a standard for post-test evaluations that would be relatively unbiased and comparable? And I think by standard, like I think we mean sort of ISO type of standard.
Yes, I think that could be done. I think that could be done if there could be a great standard for the evaluation of students after the implementation of AR/VR in their studies. I think that could be one way to go about it.
And do you see maybe a way, you know, do you have a framework that you like could think of, or something that would work? Because I guess in some respects it would involve, you know, a lot of the psychological biases and dealing with non-influences and stuff like that. Do you know, could you see that as being something that, or what would you see as the framework, I think is my question.
Okay, for the framework, right now, I don't really have, on top of my head, I can't really think about a way to go about it. It's definitely going to require intensive work, but it's an area that is interesting to look into. That I agree.
Okay. And my question from myself, if anybody has any other questions, please put it in the Q&A or in the chat. But my question from me is, so as you admitted, and I think you changed your title of your paper as well, you've taken really the more recent papers. But one thing that would be I think would be very interesting is that, you know, as we've gone through several stages of VR, you know, VR and AR have been coming in and out of phase, right? So every time you kind of got, you know, back in the 60s, we had the first VR devices, and then the 80s, and then the 90s, and then we got newer and newer devices, right? And if I put an Oculus Quest on right now, you know, you can get so immersed because everything is tracked. You feel very natural. You can see that you can feel the boundaries. And I think we're at that point where the things are really good. But maybe what I would ask is could you see a value in looking back through history and seeing which technological advance helped the most, right? Because that is partly what you're looking at, is what really helped the post evaluation, where you're looking at the value of it. What was the most significant thing that really improved the system? Do you see the value in that?
Yes, actually, because most of what research has actually worked on is really we have fewer research that are looking into the fact that did AR VR actually did it get the job done, or were people able to use it? Because those are two different routes to look at it from. Like the were people able to use it? That's getting their notion about how they were able to use the technology. But another angle to look at, did it actually get the job done? Yeah. I think that for us to be able to give more value, then the research has to also turn to that area, looking at it from the angle that did AR VR actually, did it get the job done? Did it complete the job? Or people just enjoy using it? The immersion is one of the things people enjoy, and people become addictive about it. But an important question to actually ask is that, did they actually get the job done? I mean, if other techniques that we have been using or that we've been using without the implementation of AR VR are getting the job done. And even though AR VR is making it more interesting, more immersive, is it actually getting the job done? So I think that's where the real value is.
Okay. Yeah, good. Okay, well, thank you very much, Naheem. Thank you for your presentation.